Okay, it's David Ursulik State, man. And man, it's a crazy thing, this whole deal with The Last of Us Part 2. The story being leaked, man, by the unhappy developer, to say the least. And, you know, it's not just that the story was leaked. It's not just that some of the gameplay was leaked. It's not that the game was somewhat spoiled. But it was the discovery of what Naughty Dog had intended with the sequel, man, to this cherished narrative that is that tale of Joel and Ellie enduring together, man, the troubles, man, and the grief and the grim complaint that is, you know, the zombie apocalypse, right? The grim complaint, this surrogate father and daughter that they, you know, together, you know, have, you know, they press on in though they walk through what is this grim apocalypse, right? That was the first game that we were all so invested in. You know, but somehow it would seem, man, that Naughty Dog has stumbled upon, you know, what is possibly the, you know, that center of the culture war. How they ended up there is all too obvious. Is it not? Is it not all too obvious? You know, the intentions of the plot developers, you know, those people that sort of crafted and set a course for the studio to put together a game that many of us may not want to buy. Alas, that many of us may not want to buy. You know, The Last of Us 1 and 2 presents to us not a linear story arc, whereby the sequel would extend the narrative symbolism of the first game. Rather, the sequel seems to serve as an inverse to the original story of Joel and Ellie. It's not a continuation. You know, I think that the head developer at Naughty Dog had said that, you know, we should just let Joel and Ellie tell their story, you know, without judgment. You know, without, you know, that we need to keep an open mind and just let them tell their story. But really, man, The Last of Us Part 2 is not Joel and Ellie telling their story. It is taking the themes of the whole franchise and turning it on its head. The sequel, as I said, man, it seems to serve as an inverse to the original story of Joel and Ellie. It is not that the sequel chooses to tell a different story. It's not that the sequel chooses to tell a different story, to follow different characters, but that The Last of Us Part 2 is as a counter, an opposition to the original themes. It does this by offering antonyms of the first game's symbols and messaging. It does this by killing the first game's primary protagonist at the hands of the sequel's protagonist. That is definitive, is it not? Right? Abby is the new game's protagonist. She kills Joel at the beginning of the second game. So it is almost as though dismissing, it is almost as though, you know, violently removing the story arc, cutting it off at its roots. The Last of Us Part 2 is an antonym to the original concepts in that it exchanges the value judgments of the former in preference of the latter. And as I have said, man, it does this by destroying, by killing off, by murdering Joel at the hands of the new story arc that is Abby. Joel, the father, is exchanged for Abby, the transgender female. The father is not replaced by a mother. The father is replaced by a biological male whose subjective view of himself is preferred above what would otherwise be the empirical and natural condition of a man. The male father is replaced by the male who self-identifies as female. It is not a yin-yang contrast as a classical female and male converse would suppose. Rather, it is an inversion of Joel, the archetypal father, protector, defender, to Abby, the transgender narcissist by definition, who kills Joel not as a protector, but as an avenger. Abby doesn't inherit the role of protector. Abby does not pick up and continue the role of the father protector, the father defender. Abby is the avenger of Joel. Bitter, pissed off, that poison bitterness that is the desire to avenge. Abby is not even defending her own life. She is murdering Joel to satisfy her own thirst for reprisal, her own rancor and animus, to satisfy her own spite. She is the antithesis of Joel. Joel, the selfless protector of Ellie. Abby, after killing Joel, ironically, spends the rest of the game, of course you play as Abby, and you spend the rest of the game pursuing Ellie, right? So Abby is the antithesis of Joel. No longer the protector, no longer defending Ellie and her search to come of age, right? She's a teenager. So it's part of the story is Ellie's, her path to come of age. The father providing the protection that she may come of age, become her own person, make her own decisions. Abby is not an extension of this. Abby, you spend the rest of the game, as I said, pursuing Ellie, trying to kill her. The nature of the father archetype is exemplified in that Ellie is not Joel's biological daughter. Joel and Ellie are surrogates to one another, suggesting that the concrete metaphorical values subsumed in Joel the father, contrasting Abby, who functions in no overarching canonical narrative, but is defined by her own self-invention. Her juxtaposition supposes that no overarching narrative exists above the affairs of men, that reality is hollow, only to be filled by the whims and subjective desires of people and their amorphous preferences. Please keep in mind, because it may sound like I am making much to do about nothing, but please keep in mind that The Last of Us Part 2 is itself making these assessments by the developer's choice to position Abby against Joel as they have. It is not arbitrary. It is specific. It is an exact response to the original patriarchal narrative set up by the first game. Note that if Abby were simply an addition, if the transgender Abby were simply an addition to a kind of like Last of Us team of characters, then her role would not be so symbolic, nor so divisive to the fan base. It would seem that the plot developers at Snotty Dog are willing to exact as much damage as is necessary, in order to craft their new protagonist. It would seem, man, that they are willing to exact as much damage as is necessary. Tearing down the old order, tearing down the old game, fully rejecting the notion of an overarching sense of values that give definitive clarity and focus to the human experience. That there is no role of the father, there is no role of the mother. There is only subjection, there is only hollow reality to fill with our inventions. Let me close by supposing that maybe there is more to the story here than this nihilistic identity politics activism of the studio. It may be that Snotty Dog has inadvertently stumbled on an unintended narrative. Is The Last of Us Part 2, instead of a tale of destruction of the patriarchy in favor of a kind of anarchistic identity idealism, is it possible that what they've created here is in fact a reflection on human corruption? Keep in mind that the backdrop of the game is death. The plague that is the apocalypse, that is the quasi-zombie apocalypse, the backdrop is death. It is the destruction of society. It is the destruction of community. It is the destruction of economy. It is the overwhelming ruin and wreckage of human life. The original story arc was Ellie and Joel pressing through together. Ellie coming of age in this grim world of disease, of plague, of antagonism around every corner. And yet still, the father giving strength and protection, and the daughter coming of age to be her own person. This was the story. It was pro-life. In a world given over to death, the narrative, their struggle together was pro-life. Even in that Ellie was supposed to have an immunity, right, to the virus, and they were trying to get her to the fireflies, right? Is that what it was? In that, the struggle was towards life. It was towards, the living. And it could be that what Naughty Dog has stumbled upon here in this sequel is not the identity politics of their leftist hardcore activism, but rather what they've stumbled upon is a reflection on human corruption. That even when we do good, even when we strive to do good, it would seem that corruption is there to ruin the good, to spoil the perfume of the living. Let me read this passage out of the book of Isaiah, chapter 59. And there's a sentiment here. There's a sentiment here of the corruption of life, the corruption, the darkness that is in our soul, in the condition, the human condition of man, though we strive to live. And yet corruption is with us. This dualism of the human condition. Though we seek to do good, evil is there with us, dragging us down. Is that kind of maybe what Abby is a symbol of? Is Abby synonymous with this internal darkness that undoes the good that we seek to do? In Isaiah chapter 59 and down in verse 9, it says, "Therefore justice is far from us, nor does righteousness overtake us. We look for light, but there is darkness." We looked for light, like think of it like this. In The Last of Us Part 1, there was hope. We looked for light. There was hope at the end of the struggle. But behold, there is darkness, right? The second game rolls through. Behold, there is darkness. We grope for the wall like the blind. We grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noonday as at twilight. We are as dead men in desolate places. How appropriate. In the thralls of a pandemic of death that is the plague of The Last of Us, in the thralls of a pandemic of death, we the living are yet still as dead men in desolate places. We all growl like bears. We moan sadly like doves. We look for justice, but there is none. For salvation, but it is far from us. Down in verse 14, I'm going to pick it up. It says here, "Justice is turned back, and righteousness stands afar off. For truth is fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter. So truth fails, and he who departs from evil makes himself a prey." Joel sought to depart from the evil of this world and trying to be the father that he couldn't be to his real biological daughter, and yet to try to be the father to Ellie, and yet the evil of this life still found him, still sought him out to tear him apart. So really, what is Abby in this game narrative? Is not Abby the transgender synonymous of all of our human frailty, all of our human fault, all of our human inability to recognize what is necessary, to recognize what is good, to recognize the overarching canonical values that give definition and are definitive and are above the affairs of men. Indeed, are not invented, are not the product of our own subjection, but rather are values and laws of nature that we ourselves must be subjected to. Think of it. How is it that when a dog kills another dog, it's not murder? When a dog goes and gets busy on another dog, it's not rape. It's like in the animal world, the values don't apply because they're animals. Animals don't murder other animals, they kill other animals. But humans commit murder. Humans commit rape. Humans will evade that which is good. And so it may be, man, that Snotty Dog has stumbled upon something that indeed is reflective of the human condition. And it is that our human propensity to botch, our human propensity to fail, our human propensity to ruin what is good and do it without thought, do it without discernment. Anyway, and that, man, is, that's something to be said, man, about what this game may mean. I think it is interesting in this time, in our culture, in our society, that we see this narrative coming from this gaming studio. It speaks of our culture. It speaks of these issues that are no doubt that we struggle with. Anyway, God bless. Thanks for watching. Comment below. Let me know what's up. And if you think I'm full of it, man, I would like to hear it at the end of this vid, man. Comment below, please. Give me a comment, man. Say something. Say anything. All right? God bless. Take care.